Hello, this is video 2 for adjective clauses. I'm going to try to explain some of the more confusing aspects of adjective clauses. So on this slide, I want you to remember that adjective clauses always start with a relative pronoun. Whoops, I just said always. I can't say always. Often they start with a relative pronoun, but not always, and that's one of the confusing points. And then, of course, there is always, oops, I can't say that either. I cannot say that there's always a subject. Or the confusing thing is that sometimes the pronoun and the subject are the same word. But I know for sure I can say there's always a verb. Okay? So, this is confusing. This is what I'm going to try to explain in this video. So first I have a few examples of adjective clauses without the main clause. It's just an adjective clause. There's no sentence here. So remember, usually there's a relative pronoun first. So I have some different ones here. That, whose, whom, who, which, and then that again. And often we see a subject right after that word, like we, and her family. But you should notice that sometimes there's a verb right after the pronoun. For example, who paid for the dinner? So right after the pronoun is the verb. Same thing here. Right after the pronoun which is the verb, was designed. But these are adjective clauses. These are not sentences. So the next question is, how could I build a sentence around these clauses? Well, of course, I would need a noun to describe in the sentence. So I have a couple examples here. Remember, the noun could very likely be a subject, like my brother-in-law. Okay, so I have this same adjective clause that I listed up above, and now I have it inside the complete sentence. My brother-in-law, whose wife is a doctor, lives in Tampa, Florida. Maybe the noun is an object, like the woman. I wanted to thank the woman. I wanted to thank who? The woman. So woman is an object, and this time I have the adjective clause there to describe her. I wanted to thank the woman who paid for the dinner. And nouns can also be an object of a preposition. The teacher told us a story about a dog. So there's the preposition about. About what? About a dog. Okay, so this is the noun that's being described. What kind of dog? Well, it's a dog that her family had more than 50 years ago. Okay, so we have a few correct examples of sentences with adjective clauses here. We still have some confusing points to straighten out, I think. Okay, I think this is confusing. I have a list of sentences here, and they look very, very similar. And I want you to start thinking about why some are correct and some are not. Okay, so I've crossed out number 2 and number 6. Those are not correct. The others are. You can see that the subject of all these sentences is the professor. And then you can see an adjective clause. Sometimes it starts with who or whom or that. Number 4 doesn't have a pronoun. Number 5 has that, and number 6 doesn't have a pronoun. Okay. Oops. So we're looking at differences between who and whom. We're looking at differences between who and that. And we need to find out, when can I write a sentence with no pronoun? because this one, number 6, has no pronoun, and it's not correct. Let's keep going. What is going on? This is really a matter of knowing about subjects and objects in your sentence. This has to do with thinking about the connection, and I mean the grammatical connection between the main clause and the adjective clause. This has to do with what noun is being described and what word in the adjective clause represents that noun. I don't blame you if you're still confused. Let's keep going. Okay, I'm hoping that maybe this will help a little bit. The best way that I can explain this is to analyze the 2 sentences as 2 separate sentences to begin with, and to think of the part that turns into the adjective clause as what I call a baby sentence. So the baby sentence becomes the adjective clause inside the bigger sentence. Okay, so look at the colors here. The red for the professor and she. And those are both subjects, right? The professor started the ESL program. The baby sentence is she retired last year. The professor, that's the same person as this she, right? And they're both subjects. So when we're describing a person, of course we can use who. And there's my adjective clause. Who retired last year. If it's a subject, I cannot use whom. Whom is only for objects. So that's why this second one is not correct. Remember, that is probably the most common pronoun because we use it for people and for things. And I'm pretty sure that it's more common. Definitely who and that are both correct, but I put an asterisk here. I'm pretty sure this would be the most common way for people to say this sentence. The professor that retired last year started the ESL program. So, when your grammatical connection, this subject and this subject, when this is a subject, you cannot omit it. You cannot leave it out because subjects always have to be there. Every clause has to have a subject. That's why this one is not correct. I put the number sign or the pound sign to represent no pronoun. Okay, so in the first example with who equals the subject and the verb comes right after. Same thing with the third example. That equals the subject and the verb comes right after. I cannot omit who or that because they are the subject and the subject must be there. Okay, the green one's different. The professor started the ESL program. The baby sentence is you know her, object. Okay, so this object is the same as this noun that we're going to describe. We're still describing a person. So again, we can use who. The professor who you know started the ESL program. When it's an object, we can also use whom, and that is more formal. They're both correct. Whom is more formal. Okay, so whom can only be used when it refers to an object, as in you know her. That word has disappeared, right? That word is represented by the word whom. You can use who, you can use whom, you can use that, and I put an asterisk. That's probably the most common way, or maybe also very common with no pronoun. So here's the rule. When we can omit the pronoun is when it represents an object. Okay, so her, you know her, that's an object. The subject is you. The verb is know. Those are in place. But the object can be omitted. The professor you know started the ESL program. So these last two are the most common ways. I think when we speak, we do this last way a lot. When we write, I think it's better to use that. And I think especially you students should write it this way, because that helps to show you where you're making the connection between the two clauses. That's it. Goodbye.